John Stanley with you on the Drive Time Show for Paul Murray this afternoon. I have show business royalty here in the studio with me this afternoon, and indeed I'm starting to worry about one of our iconic buildings. On Thursday, the Queen Victoria building, the ABC has an event where you can go along and meet the man I have in the studio with me, the great Michael Crawford. Now, I don't know that they're going to be able to accommodate all the people who are going to be wanting to go along, because you have a massive, massive fan base. You must realise how many people in this country love what you've done over so many years.
Well, you're very kind, John. But you're always very nervous as an artist as to who's going to turn up. And we once did something in San Francisco where there were 8 people there, and 5 of them with the record company. So I don't always feel too confident about the amount of people turning up.
You're here promoting a CD, The Story of My Life,
yes,
and talking about your life. And I'm someone who loved Frank Spencer back in the mid-1970s.
Yeah.
I grew up with Frank Spencer. And then suddenly the bloke that was playing Frank Spencer was cast as the Phantom of the Opera. I think, how did this work? And in fact, you were such an accomplished Broadway star, and you'd played in Hollywood movies before Frank Spencer. You were a big star in the 1960s.
Well, I wouldn't say I was a big star, but I'd done quite a body of work, and I'd started when I was about 12. So I had a sort of fairly thin voice, and luckily I could sing in tune, but it wasn't that appealing. So
you're underselling yourself.
No, it was the truth.
Really?
I mean, yes, oh yes.
When
And
you were
many
in Hello,
occasions
Dolly.
in the choir, they asked me to mime rather than sing, so that gives you an idea.
But you'd played on Broadway. You were in Hello, Dolly with Streisand and Walter Matthau.
Yes.
So,
but if you listen to now, Put On Your Sunday Clothes, say, it sounds a bit like Looney Tunes' voice. It's very, very thin, and it's enthusiastic and it's in tune. That's the main thing. But it's not. When I started, after I finished Hello, Dolly, was the first time I was about to do a musical in the West End called Billy, based on Billy Liar, written by John Barry, that did all the Bond music, great Bond music. And they sent me to a singing teacher because they said, you've got to do 8 shows a week, and I insist you go to a singing teacher. Well, I hadn't got on with a teacher since kindergarten, because I was interested in soccer and cricket, and that was about it. But this guy I went to, and he started to work on my voice, and for the next 30 years I was with this singing teacher. And after 20 years I worked with him, I began to sing classical music. And one day, you may have heard this story, but indulge me. I'm singing in the studio with the voice coach, and Andrew Lloyd Webber arrives with Sarah Brightman, and they go in the front door downstairs underneath the studio, and they can hear me singing upstairs. They don't know who it is. So I finish crucifying this piece of classical music. I leave, and Andrew comes up the stairs and says to my singing teacher, who was that singing just now? And he said, I'm so sorry, Andrew, it was Michael Crawford. He said, he's going to get better, I know. And he said, no. He said, I think we may have found our Phantom. Now, and that was about the last person they were ever going to see or audition for Phantom of the Opera. But he didn't see the face. There's the rub.
Because a lot of people at the time said, you've got Frank Spencer doing this.
Yes. So he didn't see the face, he heard the voice. Now, as you weren't, as the Phantom, going to see my face anyway, you had this wonderful opportunity to hide the face that everybody knew as Frank on television, and then create this character behind the mask. And it as an actor, it's another part and another opportunity. And with the lessons that I'd taken for all those years and the hours you'd spent learning, I had this new voice, and it just opened a new life began for me.
Of course, and I want to get back to Frank in a moment, but
Yeah.
the first time you get the script and the music for Phantom,
Yeah.
and because you knew what the story was, and he produces the music, and you look at the music of the night, you look at some of these other wonderful songs, and you think, when you first performed them, first heard them,
Yeah.
you must have been bowled over, because they're immediately obvious as something very special?
Well, it's easy to look back and say that, but when you first listen to something, you have to then put a body, a face, a heart, a soul, movement, every movement to that character. You have to give birth to a character. And it took me back when I listened. All I had was Phantom of the Opera and Music of the Night to listen to. He pre-recorded these two things with the orchestra, so I had them to listen to. And the minute the overture started up, it made my head look tilted forward, my left shoulder went up, and I broke out my hair. I had goosebumps, and the back of my neck, the hair stood on end.
How could you not?
And it was as though I knew how he was going to stand, and it was as though it had just entered your body, that you knew how he would stand. Then you listen to Music of the Night, and you have a choice. You can sing it as a straightforward tenor song, nighttime sharpens. Now that is not going to be seductive or passionate, I felt. So Andrew allowed me to be able to sing it with far more depth. And what I'd grown up with was jazz, and I was crazy about saxophone. And a saxophone gives a great depth of sound, whereas there's a sort of air of and so I was able to try out on Andrew going, nighttime sharpens, heightens. So it was coming from deep, deep inside you. And he said, fine. That's all. I mean, not a man.
I'm getting goosebumps just now.
But not a man of many words. But you see, he allowed that. I mean, if he'd said, no, I want my song sung, I want it sung properly, I was an actor, and he let me do that. So thank goodness. It then was, you wanted to hypnotize. As this character, you wanted to seduce the girl and hypnotize the girl, who is your audience, and has to be you out there in that theatre. So
I mentioned Frank a moment ago, and you kind of winced
at
the thought of that. Let me just play a little bit of Frank. Just a little bit of Frank here. Here we go. Here's a little bit of who I can describe as the great Frank Spencer.
Are you going to the maternity hospital this morning?
What for?
Well, they're running special fathers classes for those that couldn't attend in the evenings. Well, you haven't been to one since they started, Frank.
I have. I went last week.
Well, you can hardly count that. You didn't go in till 5 minutes before the end, and you spent 4 of those on the floor.
I didn't know they were going to show that film in Technicolor.
There's a little bit of Frank from those days. It's wonderful, the memories of that, but also the slapstick humour. From you based that on Chaplin, Buster Keaton, some of the greats of the past, didn't you?
Yes, and you base it on your own life, of your own life experience, a lot of it, because then that's the most natural. And I'd been at the birth of my second daughter, unfortunately for my ex-wife, which explains why she's my ex-wife. But it was, for any man being in that circumstance a few years back, 40 years ago, was a it wasn't popular to have a father in at the birth, and I was determined to be there, and the doctor was sort of spent most of his time shouting at me as to where to stand, not to stand there, touch her, don't touch her there, hold her arm, and then in the end I passed out on the floor. So it was a loving experience that you wanted to be there, but was also very funny afterwards. So
hilarious.
you bring it into the writing. And then the physicality is, I was a boy, and so I was an only child. I got up to all these things. Used to go on roller skates and hang on the back of a bus, and then get told off by the police. So this time I could write it and do it with the police holding the traffic up for me to do it.
Michael, it's been just such a pleasure having you here today.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in, giving us so much of your time. People can see you on Thursday. There's going to be a lot of people there, I think.
I
Queen
hope so.
Victoria Building on Thursday, ABC Shop. You're going to be signing CDs.
Yeah, I am.
Can you sign this one for us? That'd be
I
great.
can indeed.
Thank you very much, Michael Crawford.
Thank you, John.